We open on a fresh vigilante hanging and the mob responsible standing around the bodies. It seems out of place that Ben is pushing and shoving to get through the crowd, and none of the boys are helping him. Before finding the scene of the crime, the Cartwrights check the jail that has the front door broken into and no mention of the law. Again. So they have a jail but no sheriff, it seems like. Can we just get a fresh-faced Roy Coffey applying for the job already? I know we have a ways to go before we get to him, but I can dream. The next to run through the mass of complacent killers is a young woman who Ben shouts not to allow to see the dead bodies. Again, seems odd that none of his sons try to stop it before he tells them to. The Cartwrights of all people wouldn't want a woman seeing two hanged men, especially as we come to find out that they were her father and brother. We get this plot exposition courtesy of Town Karen and wife of a merchant, Mrs. Buford, who then goes on to say that this girl is just as guilty as her father and brother were. Lita Malvette collapses on the ground upon taking in the dreadful sight. In fairness, Joe did try to grab her, just not very well. Roll credits. In the next scene, we find out that the Cartwrights have taken Lita home with them and Doc Martin has just examined her. Ben has what Paul Martin calls moral indignity and further tells Ben not to take it out on him before instructing Ben to give her a tablet every few hours. Ben goes on about how this girl's being treated, and Doc pieces out like me at the family gathering when politics get brought up. Then we see Ben pop into Lita's room, and I had to laugh because it reminds me of the original Disney Snow White when the dwarves first find snow in their beds. Then we cut to Joe, firing his gun repeatedly as Hoss brings in a new horse who obviously proceeds to freak out. Hoss rightfully gives him a lecture and Adam calmly threatens to take the gun away from him until he grows up. When Ben asks what the shooting was about, Adam has the best line in the episode. Your baby son was playing stage robber. Joe brings up how he's just trying to protect the mine payroll they're responsible for. By this point, I was rubbing my temple with all the fingers of one hand plus the palm. Yes, Joe is young. That being said, he has proven time and time again how intelligent he is. Way back in the pilot episode, they underestimated him and he proved himself more than capable, so I really do hate that they dumbed him down just to move the plot along. I said that's the reason because when he asks who's going to hear him way out here, in rides Clay Renton. He wants to see Lita, and Ben has obvious mistrust for this man, but Hoss speaks up for him, saying it might do Lita some good. Ben follows Clay up to Lita's room, where she tells him she needed him and he wasn't there for her. Clay tells her that she shouldn't listen to the talk against her and asks Ben to back him up. Ben dodges the question by saying that she needs her rest. Clay leaves and makes reference to a possible history with Joe back in the day. I can see Ben probably shutting that down right off. Adam is suspicious instantly about Clay coming around, furthering my theory. For some odd reason, Ben acts like he'd not thought of that. Wasn't he just thinking Clay's no good, 'cause that's how he acted? Again, kind of dumbing down a character for the sake of plot. Just the opposite, they make Adam less sympathetic than we know him to be in regards to Lita. We only really see him act that way one other time, and that's in Season 6, when Purnell was already out the door anyway. I didn't like it then either. He does have a point, though, that they're inviting trouble in there because Clay returns to his gang, to which we find out Lita's hanged father and brother once belonged. The leader, Spence, asks Clay where he thinks he's been. Wait, does Clay have a history of hallucinations? Because that would be interesting. And they drop it in order to foreshadow Clay taking control of the gang later. Right now, they have no idea that Clay was just standing right next to the wagon containing the payroll, luckily for Joe. They still don't know where it is, which is weird. I thought that was Clay's whole reason for visiting Lita on the Ponderosa. It was supposed to be an excuse, and that's why he wasn't there for her until right now. He's supposed to know she's staying with the people protecting the money, right? No? Guess that's just me. When Ben is getting ready to drive Lita home the next day, she thanks Hoss for caring after her chickens. Hoss mentions how he and the chickens got to know each other by first names, presumably before he ate them. Just kidding. Haas appears to really care about Lita, but inside the house is the complication/competition. Clay has just been leaning against the back of the door for however long he's been there, waiting for her. How do you know she was coming home that day? Was he squatting on her place? She expresses doubts about him, and he patronizes her about how the Cartwrights are better than her. Stay in your lane, and never try to be anything better than where you came from, little girl. I'll just mention here that I'm not crazy for Susan Oliver's acting, or Jack Lord's for that matter, but I feel for Lita by this point in the episode. The following day, she resumes taking her eggs to store owner and local sex pest Harvey Buford, the husband of the woman from the opening scene. He gets to sniffing her, and she's admiring a pair of shoes she can't afford. Then he lifts her dress to see, one assumes, how the shoe looks on her. She tells him over and over she doesn't have the money. He comes up with a way for her to trade. He says he'll pick up the eggs once in a while at her place. This is a good time to mention the sponsor for today's video, Perv Begone Spray. Perv Begone Spray, for when those creeps come a-creepin'. Just spray a generous amount straight into his eyes. Within seconds, his full person will shrink until it evaporates into thin air. She slaps him just as Clay pops up. What is it with these men following this poor girl around? Harvey and Clay have words when he accuses her of trying to steal the shoes. Both Lita and Clay slap Harvey across the face, then his wife comes in and kicks the young couple out sans shoes. He again tries his story on his wife, who says she saw it all. And now we see why she is the way she is. I'm willing to bet that mine payroll and the Ponderosa that it's on, this has happened before with other young women. Get 50% off your order of Perv Begone at checkout with my code, YADUH. Back home on the ranch, Hoss and Joe have about 50,000 ideas on how to protect the payroll, ranging from drag to Amish appropriation. None of it matters, though, as Joe is informed that both he and Adam have to miss the charity bazaar in town. At first, Adam is loving being on the top of Superiority Mountain, until Ben knocks him down next to Joe. Hoss boasts how he's trustworthy, and this man just delivers all of his lines so sweetly that you can't even blame him. Clay has his bird-watching binoculars and spots the golden goose at last, right where he'd just been the day before. Now that he's got an axe to grind against Harvey, he decides to rob Harvey's store for money to get fresh horses, so that they can get away clean after they rob the payroll. Spence disagrees and taunts Clay about how he's trying to be a grown man when he's still a kid. Clay joyfully shoots Spence dead. The rest of the gang fall in line and commit to Clay's plan. He's so happy with himself that he sleeps on Lita's couch all day and then proposes to her. He tells her that he's willing to let people talk against him for marrying her, like everyone thought he was such a prize before. Sir, didn't you just get out of a 2-year jail sentence? Of course, Lita accepts. Hoss stops by the following day, and Lita shows him her dress and tells her she's engaged to Clay. Here's something that I feel like a lot of viewers might miss about this. Hoss has beamed in every scene they've shared so far, and here he looks absolutely crushed by her news. You could assume he just worries Clay isn't good enough for her, but I believe it to be more. It sounds to me like all that time they were getting to know each other, while Lita stayed at the ranch, he was falling for her, and she totally can't read the room because she asks if he's going to wish her happiness when he hesitates. Nothing is ever made of it, so maybe we're not supposed to read that far into it, but I did. At the bazaar, Mrs. Buford plays polite society with Ben, who previously accused her of lacking decency because she was among a group of lynchers. She now wants him to judge the dressmaking contest. He declines politely, and he and Hoss go on to enjoy themselves, joking that Joe and Adam are missing everything. Everyone always assumes that Joe is Ben's favorite, but really it's Hoss. Hoss doesn't get in trouble unless it's with Joe. Hoss is trustworthy, as he said before. Careful though, Pa. The other two might start to notice. Harvey isn't supposed to be in the store, but he needs something for his wife and walks in on the robbery. You kind of have to wonder if she planned that. I mean, I know she had no way of knowing, but I can see her wanting to get rid of this guy. Theories in the comments. Clay ends up killing Mr. Buford for the pittance of $50. Lita's being sweet toward Mrs. Buford and asking to enter her dress. Mrs. Buford continually ignores her until finally she knocks it down into the dust. This one final act of cruelty pushes Lita to finally give up on being kind or trying to be better than what the town thinks of her. She decides Clay was right. She shows one last act of mercy in saying that she feels sorry for Mrs. Buford but does not hate her. Clay hides out at Lita's place until Ben shows up to tell her that they found Harvey Buford dead, and his last word was Clay Renton. Clay hides while Ben pretends to leave once Lita tells him that she'd choose Clay over anyone, even at the cost of being wrong. Once the door closes, though, she doubts him in private. She grills him on what really happened and finally asks outright if he robbed the store. He answers by asking if she stole the shoes, in a way of not answering the question while causing her to assume he's innocent like she was. The Cartwright sons find the other men and take them to where there's a jail to hold them. Again, no mention of a sheriff. The mob at last descends once again on the Melvettes, this time a woman and last one alive. Ben tells them that they aren't going to hurt her, and the way Adam slowly moves around and holds up his gun to keep Ben's promise is perfect. Ben tries again to reason with Lita. Clay hurriedly tells her to pack. He finally admits his guilt and then, in a symbolic final straw, knocks the dress down onto the floor. One thing that has hit my ear wrong ever since I first watched this one was how Clay says, "No more homemade dresses. I'm going to get you the best wedding dress you ever had." Like, what other wedding dresses has she had, dude? She finally pulls the rifle on Clay, and he thinks she's faking, so he confidently tells her he'll hide his gun in his boot and they'll shoot past the mob like Bonnie and Clyde. That plan goes downhill when she immediately tells Ben that Clay has a gun in his boot, and Ben fires faster, killing Clay. Clay dies with the one big one on his mind. Not the love he could have had with Lita, but the payroll money. Mrs. Buford at last feels shame for her actions and empathy because she knows what her husband was. She asks Ben to tell Lita if there's anything that she can do to help her, and she at least wants her to know she's sorry. Ben tells her to tell Lita that herself. The episode ends with Mrs. Buford walking toward the direction Lita goes. The dialogue in this one is clunky a lot of the time. Lita and Clay are difficult to connect to or with. Like I said, I don't like how they did Joe this episode. I hate when smart characters are made to seem dumb. Neither he nor Adam really says much during the scenes that aren't taking place on the ranch. Huss wasn't the center focus, but he stood out the most out of the four mains. This one wasn't really about any of the Cartwrights, and that can influence how it seems, but I don't think that was the problem. If I liked the characters more, I wouldn't be bothered that it didn't center around a Cartwright. It was the acting more than the storyline. I guess if I had to pick which one of the mains this one focuses on, it would probably be Ben the most. Ben has the most screen time and he tries the most with Lita. The Bufords were both done well as the lower level antagonists of the story, while Jack Lord's Clay didn't wow me. This is one of those that definitely feels like a season 1 episode without even knowing it is ahead of time. Edward Platt is really good at playing slimy characters, so Harvey was a role he's great in. Irene Tedrow will be back several more times as a variety of characters and is always very good. She really does the role of Mrs. Buford justice. I joked earlier that she's a bit of a Karen at the start, but it's really true. She enables her husband's misogyny and turns on his innocent victims. Jack Lord goes on to fame after this in Hawaii Five-0, but in this he just grates on my nerves. I feel like Spence is right about him. He wants to seem menacing, but he's really just a whiny child. Susan Oliver is able to make me feel for her, but it takes a while for me to get past how kind of annoying Lita is. Her story is inspirational, I just feel like the actress doesn't land for me. Roy Engel as Doc Martin is always a delight to watch and will become a mainstay very soon. I don't go back to this one very much, but what about you? Do you like it? If you do, change my mind. Tell me what I'm missing. If you're new, welcome, and a subscribe would mean the world to me. Thanks.